to The Green Rush, a podcast about the intersection of cannabis, the capital markets, and culture. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg of KCSA Strategic Communications speak with the business leaders, financial experts, cultural icons, legislators, and generally interesting people moving the cannabis industry forward. Today, our hosts are speaking with Dr. John Oram, the CEO and founder of NUG, one of the strongest brands in the nation's largest cannabis market of California. NUG is a vertically integrated company offering award-winning branded products and recently began opening up its own retail shops in Northern California. So don't sit back, lean forward. Now on to our interview with Louis, Ann, and Dr. John Oram.
Hi, Ann.
Hi, Louis.
You know, it's funny. We've gone through this string of not recording together, and now we're back to recording together. And I don't know. I don't know.
Who's luckier than you?
Who luckier than you're right. Thank you. You brought me back to center. I appreciate that. So before we talk about our guest that we're going to talk to today, I have to rave about two things I did this week that just blew my mind. The first was this past Sunday, which was October 13th. My wife and I went and saw David Byrne on Broadway. And it was one of the coolest, most amazing artistic experiences I've ever been through. It was just
I miss Broadway.
Oh, but it wasn't just
one of the biggest
Broadway.
things I miss about New York.
He was so good, and his band was amazing, and he just it's a limited run, and it is not just Talking Head stuff. I mean, he played 5 or 6 Talking Head songs, but it was
I'm thinking it's a concert. I'm thinking it was
it's
a Broadway
on Broadway.
show.
It is a Broadway show. It's on Broadway.
Okay.
It's on 44th Street, and he puts this mix between visual and dance and music, and it was overwhelming. It was fantastic. And then last night, my wife and I, who are leading our best lives, went to dinner at David Boulet's restaurant, where Andrew Weil he actually helped write the menu, which was fantastic. And it was all about anti-inflammatory foods. And then he gave a talk afterwards, and he actually spent a good amount of time talking about the relationship between the endocannabinoid system and inflammation. And it was really fascinating.
Let's get him on.
It's funny you should mention that. I asked him, and he said yes. So we'll see. But sometime soon, we may have Dr. Andrew Weil on talking about the intersection of mind-body and the use of plant-based medicines, cannabis, and others to heal the world. It's really this is probably the most influential doctor there is out there. So, he makes Dr. Oz look like a poser.
I digress. Hey, let's start the pod.
Well, before we do that, the guy that we're talking to today is Dr. John Oram from a company called NUG, which is a vertically integrated, California-only cannabis company that's focused on infused products. Really fascinating, beautiful packaging, great taste.
Yep, if you're in California, you definitely know this brand.
Yeah. So, and I think one of the interesting things about this is we have talked to now a lot of California-only companies, from NorCal to Diana Med. There are, and now NUG. It's really interesting to see how California really is trying to be the crucible of the creation of national brands. So
We're the shit.
Yeah. You are the shit. Well done. All right. So with that, let's start our conversation with Dr. John Oram from NUG. Dr. Oram, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Awesome. So let's jump right into the conversation. I've seen you talk about how NUG, of which you are the CEO, is both a cannabis brand and a cannabis company. How do you think about that? How do you think about the difference between brand and company, and how are you focusing on the brand side?
Well, that's a good question, and some of that is just semantics, but words matter, especially when you're trying to brand yourself. So it is a good question. We are a vertically integrated company, and we completely control the process from seed to sale. And so I'm trying to build strong messaging around that, and trying to let the consumer know that because we can control the whole process, that we can deliver a very consistent and high quality product to the consumer. And so that's where brand comes in. How do you, a company is one thing, a company is what does the work, but a brand is really the outward expression of that. And it is what the consumer sees and identifies with. So if I can start to meld what we do with that outward expression of who we are, I think that's getting the right message to the consumer and helping them really identify quality with our products through the brand.
And in terms of the brand, how would you describe the NUG brand?
Well, there's a couple facets. There's the NUG brand today, and then there's the NUG brand of where we want to be. And unfortunately, there's a lot of friction between that. And most of that friction is regulations and banking and just the state of cannabis affairs in the industry today. But where we are today, our core demographic is individuals 24 to 34 years old. Largely our consumer base, well, it's about 60% male. So, that's close to 50-50 in terms of male and female. But we do skew a little bit more to the younger demographic. And that's by design. Today, those are the individuals that are frequenting dispensaries and spending their money on cannabis products. But we also understand where the market is trending, and we also understand that there's a need to attract new consumers and other age demographics in the future. So the challenge for us is, how do we maintain the brand identity and brand loyalty with our current demographic and not lose them, and still offer very good products and very good services to them while we still pivot a little bit and start to attract a broader demographic. And we need to be careful in that. It can't be sort of the case of Facebook, where when younger generations see their parents on Facebook, then they ditch Facebook. We don't want that to happen. So there's some challenges there.
Well, it's hard to be all things to all people. And as a single state operator in California, do you have designs on building a national brand?
We do. Yes, we absolutely do. Today, we're very much focused on California. This is a very dynamic market. It's a large market. We need to get a strong foothold here, and then we will start our expansion. We are currently in conversations on expansion nationwide and even internationally, but we're taking those slowly and very strategically. And again, operationally, just focusing on California. We feel if we can develop a very strong brand here that people can identify with and even link towards a California lifestyle, we think that is going to help us move the brand across the nation and even internationally.
And no, I stepped on you. I haven't done that in a long time, so go ahead.
I forgot my question.
Go
ahead.
I'll ask it then. So
brand growth, international.
Well, no, yeah. It's from a brand perspective. If you're looking at other states, right? If the objective is to grow and we have to work within the current structure, the regulatory framework, is it a license model, or are you going to say, okay, we're going to build our own, another vertically integrated, basically a whole new vertically integrated company in Colorado or in Illinois or in Massachusetts? Or are you going to say, we know what the brand is, we have SOPs on how to produce our products, and we're going to just license it. We're going to license our SOPs, our brand, to another operator? How are you thinking about it from that perspective?
Yes, it's more of the latter. We look forward to the day where interstate commerce can happen. So I think that's also a good reason why focusing on California and making sure all of our systems are really solid and all of our infrastructure is solid here, because I do see a day in the future where we could potentially ship products from California. But we know that's not the reality today. So how do you go multi-state or even internationally? And how do you do that in a cost-effective manner? We are not capitalized like some of these public companies. We can't just go and buy licenses all over the place and just do, and just spend money to move ourselves state to state. So for us, it's while we're developing a strong market position in California, we leverage that into, yes, licensing deals. But we don't want these to just be hands-off licensing deals where we say, here's the SOPs, see you later. We do want to get involved. We want to have our own employees in these areas to, monitor quality control, make sure all of the products are going out as they should. We will likely be centralizing a lot of the brand control and the marketing aspects here in California. So even if we are operating and distributing products in other states, we want all of the control of the brand to happen here at headquarters. So those are the kind of considerations we're talking about.
You guys are privately held at the moment, correct? And so can you talk a little bit about what it's like going out and raising money, especially in this environment on October 11th, 2019?
Yes, it's not easy raising money in the cannabis space. You would think it would be, especially with all the hype that's around. But when we started, so here I'll back up a little bit. We've been privately held and privately funded since day one, and largely by just friends and family. We have had some creative real estate deals that have helped us to grow and helped us to get our infrastructure in place. And that was fantastic. But then sometime early last year, we realized, look, the marketplace is going crazy. Other companies are raising all kinds of money. We're going to need some money to compete. So in early 2018, we went out with a Series A offering and a private placement memorandum, and we were seeking $10 million. And we traveled all over the U.S. and we went to Canada. And at that time, most of the interest with investors was how and when are you going to go public? It was they just expected that this was they just expected that this was a round to go public, and that is not our objective. We want to build a sustainable company with strong business fundamentals. And you would think that investors would love that. But at the time, they didn't. They didn't. It was tough to raise money to build a strong long-term business. It was easier to raise money if you were to say, hey, we're going to go public next week. And, this is what it's going to look like. So anyway, we fared through that. It took us about, 10 months to finally close that round for the reasons I discussed. And also, there was some changes in the marketplace during that. So it was problematic. But yes, we did close, and we actually were oversubscribed. We ended up closing at 15 million instead of 10 million. And that's put us just in a great position. We've used that money to start scaling, to start our scaling. So we've been developing new dispensaries. We've been changing some of our infrastructure around cultivation and manufacturing. And we've really been putting a lot of effort into building out our distribution systems. So the money is going to good use, and we will be looking to do another round of funding probably in the next six to 8 months.
You just described a large part of your supply chain, how you're growing, how you're processing, and your distribution. But because you're, an infused products company, and I've tried your matcha infused chocolate, and among the best things I've ever had, it was absolutely, it was delicious. But your supply chain goes beyond just cannabis, right? It goes into the matcha, the chocolate, all of the other elements that you're using. Our industry, the cannabis industry, is supposed to be a quote unquote green industry. How do you think about supply chain for the entire thing, whether it be, how you're growing your cannabis, how you're getting your chocolate or your matcha. Can you talk about that?
Yes, of course. So supply chain for us has been a different conversation than you would have in, say, a typical consumer packaged goods world. We've had to build our supply chain. It didn't exist. It's not like I'm making a cookie and I can just go source some flour and I can choose between organic or non-organic, and then go source the sugar and all of that, and to finally make a cookie. That didn't exist 10 years ago when we set out on this mission. So we had to build our supply chain. We had to build everything that we do. And that's been tough and problematic and expensive, but it's been a core strength of ours. So by building our supply chain, we do control everything. We control the costs, we control the quality, and we're able to focus in certain areas to save. For example, to save water, we've implemented a sophisticated and computer-controlled drip irrigation system for all of our irrigation, and we've conserved, I'd say, close to 60% of our water utilization. So we're using 60% less water than we used to. That's great. We can do better, but that's great. Some of the other things, to be totally honest, it's difficult to bring in green practices and eco practices right now in the cannabis space, because really the regulations, everyone is focused so much on regulations, and the regulations around packaging in general, specifically rather, are very stringent around child safety, tamper evident, and so we are limited to plastics. I mean, really, we have plastic bags, we have plastic jars, and it's just recently, I'd say within the last couple months, that we're starting to see child-resistant packaging in more reusable and recyclable forms, such as cardboard. So we will be transitioning, but our focus has to be on compliance and regulatory compliance, and unfortunately, that has not been an eco-friendly option for us.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your background and your education. I mean, we're talking about, how the cannabis industry is struggling with being this green industry. And you've got a PhD in environmental chemistry. And so I would imagine it must be difficult for you to kind of, square that with having to use all of this single-use plastic in the space. Can you, I guess, envision a future where, what does it look like a year from now or 5 years from now? Do you see, fully biodegradable products or recyclable products in the market, or you think it's still too new for us to hope? That was a very...
don't take away our hope. Don't take away our hope.
I didn't mean to be so negative with that question, but...
that's a broader question. I think as the alternative materials world, and specifically the recyclable and eco-friendly materials world develops, in general, and they're able to make better materials that can, preserve the quality of products while still having elements such as child protection and tamper evidency and resealability. I think as that happens in just the normal consumer packaged goods world, we will be bringing those technologies into our world as well. I wish that we could innovate a little bit more in our space, and I do hope to. And so that maybe cannabis can be the driver of some of that change. But to be honest, us, NUG, and frankly, almost every operator in California is so focused on regulatory compliance. And that has been such an overhang and such a constrictor of innovation that I don't see anything happening in the very, very near future. But, as we get better with our compliance, as the state sort of gets better enforcing compliance, I do think innovation will start to come about again. And when I say innovation, and we should talk about this, when I say innovation, I'm talking not only about the packaging that, the question you talk about, but we've seen very little product innovation in the space, and largely because of the economic and regulatory world that we live in.
You look at the regulatory world that you're in California. Has the state done a good job in promoting innovation, or do you feel that the regulatory regime in California is what it is, and it's not intended to stifle innovation, but it's definitely not been there to promote it?
That's right. You've got to think that the regulators are not trying to purposefully stifle innovation. I don't think that's the case. These are all good people and they're all well intentioned. It's just that the regulations are just so draconian. I mean, we do things in duplicate and triplicate and even more. I mean, we're printing out tons of paper manifests for certificate of authenticity and shipping manifests and invoice. We have to have all that on paper. We have to have hard, wet signatures. I mean, it's the world we live in right now. We are internally working on tech solutions to reduce paper, and there are some third-party softwares that are also trying to do this thing. Regulatory perspective, right now we have to be filling out paper, and we have to be burning paper, and we have to be packaging and wrapping things in plastics and child protection, and we have to be affixing barcodes and labels, and it's really insane the number of touches every product gets because of the regulations we're in. But I do see that easing. And to get to the point of your question, all of that burden, the operational burden that we are under has slowed down innovation. We don't have the time, the money, the manpower to push forward on innovation because we're still focused on checking the boxes on regulatory compliance.
I want to shift. I mean, I still want to kind of stick with your education because I think it's really fascinating. Can you talk about how, but I want to take it in a direction of the actual product itself and the chemistry of making infused cannabis.
By the way, that was a lot of fun to watch you do that, and just to watch you circle that question.
I did circle the question. I'm sorry, because I wanted to try to connect tissue. Maybe I didn't do that right. So I want to talk about products, and I want to talk about infused cannabis. And one of my colleagues, I sit in California, and one of my colleagues was trying to make homemade edibles, and it just seemed like a hot mess, and labor intensive, and getting it right. And I mean, it seems just very technical and complicated. How is what you do different from some of the other brands out there like Kiva or Bang or other companies that produce, similar products, but what makes you different?
Sure. Okay. So I have to go back to my history a little bit. And so, yes, I am a PhD in environmental chemistry and engineering, and I founded one of the very first cannabis-specific laboratories in the country. That was back in 2008, early 2009. I founded CW Analytical Laboratories, and we again, that was my chemistry and analytical science that helped me build that. And I partnered with a PhD in microbiology, and he built out the microbiology part of the lab. From that lab, we learned about cannabis and cannabis science. We had to do this stuff from the ground up. We had to develop basic, fundamental methods for testing cannabis to see what's in it, how to process it, and then eventually how to infuse. And that was, that took some time. We did some really good science, and we did learn how to infuse products quite well back at that time. So now around 2010. And at that time, we were consulting for a lot of brands, companies in the space that were producing edibles, chocolate bars and hard candies and lollipops and things like that. I don't ever divulge the brands that I worked with at the time because that's actually not relevant, but those brands are still around and still very strong in the marketplace. But in the lab, what I was learning and what I was teaching to other companies on how to infuse, it just piqued my own interest, and I wanted to do something on my own. So that's when I spun out NUG, or what eventually became NUG, and I started making products, infused products. And the approach we take that sets us apart from some of the other products in the space, again, this comes back to our vertical integration. We have plenty of supply. We have always had plenty of supply of raw materials. That has never been an issue for us, and that's always been very high quality raw materials. And then we've developed just a very solid scientific extraction method that we can control and that we can repeat. And we produce a very high quality live resin extract that then we can process further into what is commonly called a distillate in the space, which is crystal clear, It's 90% plus THC or CBD, depending it is on what we're extracting. And it has no taste, no smell, nothing. It's crystal clear. That is what we use to infuse our edibles. So when you eat a NUG product, you don't taste any cannabis. There's no bitterness, there's no back notes, there's nothing. You just taste the edible product itself.
Hence the matcha, the chocolate matcha, which was delicious.
Yes, that's right. I'm glad you enjoyed that product. Yeah, and there's no cannabis flavor in there. Now, matcha tea is, that's an acquired taste. Not everybody likes green tea, and matcha, it's very grassy, it's very earthy, it's inherently bitter on its own. But you didn't get that from the cannabis. That was from the tea itself.
I drink a bowl of matcha every day, and it's so good for you. So think back to that first product you made, and then think back to where you are today. So what was the first product that you manufactured? And then looking at your suite of products today, what's your favorite? And I know we all have, you can't say which is your favorite child, but in this instance, which is your favorite child?
Yeah, so I have either directly, developed through my company or through consulting for others, a whole suite of products. All, like I mentioned, hard candies, chocolates, some savory foods, gummies. What is my favorite? To be honest, I prefer the micro, and this may not be this is not where the current core demographic of edible consumers are today, but I think this is where the future is. I prefer the microdosed edibles, and by microdosed, we define that as anything that's 2.5 milligrams of THC or less. We like those in easy dosage forms. For example, single gummies with 2.5 milligrams each. If you want to eat 5 of them, go ahead. If you want 1 of them, that's fine too. I like to be able to titrate my own usage, and I really dislike some of the products that are out there that are 100 milligrams, and they say, if you want less, then hey, just eat 1 little tenth of this corner. That's not the right approach.
You mean you don't like the idea of somebody taking a baseball bat to the back of your head after you've eaten 1 chip?
Exactly. Hey, and I think, when you open a bag of Doritos, you want to eat the bag of Doritos. You don't want to just eat 1 chip. So I think your edible products should be similar. So they should be dosed in a form or in a way where you can actually enjoy the product and not worry about going, to the moon and back.
What do you think about drinks? You look at the Canopy Constellation investment and their investment in acreage, and that's a big bet on infused drinks. And we've spoken to others in the space, and they're all in on drinks. And I'm not sold. So what is your belief on infused drinks?
You might be the first person who told me they're not sold on drinks. And I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I think that you might not be sold because of the drinks you see in the marketplace today. There's really not a very good one in the marketplace. But I've seen some in R&D, and I've tested some in R&D. There are some pretty exciting drinks coming in the future. I do think that drinks, beverages in general, are going to be a significant part of the market moving forward. But we have a lot of science to get right. We have a lot of education of the consumers to get right, so it is going to take some time.
Yeah, I think you got it with the education part, right? Your cannabis consumer today, even the new entrants, they have some familiarity with the idea of the ritual of rolling a joint or now smoking a vape pen. They've heard about edibles, but an infused drink will be such a heavy lift, and in a constrained communications environment where you can't buy TV, you can't really buy internet. How is the industry, and this is where my skepticism from the drinks comes from, is I don't know how the industry is going to do a good job of educating on this. So you're gonna spend money to try and create a whole new category when you have well-established categories and consumers who are habituated to their use.
That's right. And you asked me the previous question. You asked what's my favorite product, and I my mind went to edible product because that's the topic we were talking about. But I agree with you. If I were to restate my answer, absolutely, my favorite product is pure cannabis flower. I like to roll a joint and I like to enjoy it with friends. There's no question about that. That to me is number one, and that's where the culture is and where it comes from, and that's going to be around for a long time. On the edible side, edibles right now, they are a big part of the marketplace. I'd say 10 to 15% of California's market are edibles. That's a big slice for a single category. And then beverages are not really here yet, sub 1%, but they're coming. And I think the challenge around beverages and edibles in general, yes, is education. And we have limited means by which to educate. We have industry magazines, trade magazines, industry rags that, hey, you're preaching to the choir in those magazines, so that's not an effective means for education. We can't take out large TV or digital ads yet, but I do see a lot of that changing.
We tried to buy the first Super Bowl ad last year, right? So
Yep, that's right. So that didn't happen. So, but that's slowly going to change. If you focusing just on the product itself, let's focus on beverages for a second. Beverages are social and inherently social. You go to a friend's house, you bring a case of beer, or you bring a bottle of wine, and you enjoy it together. That's how cannabis beverages are going to be treated and going to be consumed, is in a social setting. But that sets up a perfect storm, a problem. That's a problem, because if you're taking if you're having a beverage that has a long onset, let's say it takes you a half hour to even start feeling the initial effects of the beverage, and you're in a social setting, it's so easy to just open a beverage and have another one with a friend, and then open a beverage and have another one with a friend, and you haven't felt anything yet. That's a big problem. So when I know the beverages we're working on, and because we will be releasing a line here with, I'd say in the next 6 months, the beverages we're working on, they not only need to taste good and shelf stable and not be cloudy and have, a bunch of crap floating around in them and set them in at the bottom. It has to be a nice beverage, but it needs to be rapid onset. I firmly believe it needs to be rapid onset. You need to, if you take a cannabis beverage, you should feel it in 5 to 10 minutes. I think that's good for the consumer, because then you're getting the effects you want, and it's safe for the consumer if they feel it sooner, so that it prevents overconsumption.
So I love your blog, first of all. So thanks for being one of the companies out there that actually keeps up with the blog. I think it's refreshing. I was doing a little bit of reading on your relationship or your partnership with Oakland's Cannabis Equity Program. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the equity program here in Oakland is one of the first, or actually the first in the country. We more commonly now refer to it as the social justice program or the social equity program. And that program is being repeated not only in other cities in California, but it's also being echoed elsewhere in the country. And what the goal of the social equity program is to help to reconcile and somehow fix the problems from the war on drugs. The fact that certain populations were persecuted at a higher rate than others, and have been marginalized and not been able to enter the cannabis industry. So Oakland was a leader. The city of Oakland, I don't take credit in this, the city of Oakland was a leader in pushing that forward. I've been operating in Oakland for over 10 years now. It was so when I participated in the trying to figure out how to implement this program, it was tough.
You're located in Northern California right now, and PG&E are doing these rolling blackouts. How do you prepare for something like that from a business planning or business continuity perspective?
To be honest, you don't.
And how much time in advance did you get notice, or how much advance notice did you guys get? Because I only remember hearing about it like a couple of days ago.
That's right. Yeah, it's just a couple days notice at the most. And then if you try to go and get a generator, everybody's doing a mad scramble to get generators. And then try to get a generator to operate a few 100,000 square feet of indoor cultivation plus a manufacturing facility. It just doesn't work. So, the best laid plans for us really just lead to we just go dark for a couple days, unfortunately. So we need to make sure the plants are healthy, the plants are still alive, and that, no bad.
Is there insurance for that?
That's a good question. You can get crop insurance in this space. We don't. We purposefully, have elected not to have crop insurance because the payout terms are just so restrictive. You have to prove so much in losses. That's hard to do. Who's going to audit the amounts? So no, we do not have crop insurance. And whether that would cover power outages versus some other like theft or some other catastrophic loss, I'm not quite sure.
And it's not like PG&E is an act of God. They made the decision to do it. So
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's problematic. So if anything goes wrong around here, we just blame it on PG&E right now. So that's good. We have a scapegoat.
I'm always the scapegoat, by the way. I'm always
okay.
So before we got off track on blaming PG&E for everything. So let's go back to the social justice component there, and what you guys are doing in the space, and basically, you were saying that you need to give away basically a chunk of your company, and how kind of hard it was to do this, and that's kind of where we left off.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so NUG has always been supportive of the idea of social justice, and again, the difficulty was trying to figure out how to do it in a way that's going to work and be sustainable and actually provide benefits to underserved communities. So it took us about a year to negotiate with the city and really brainstorm at the city and figure out ways to do this. And what the outcome is what we now call the Social Equity Incubator Program. And what we do for that is we here at NUG we incubate 6 social equity qualified applicants. They're actually groups, so 6 different groups. And we give each one of those groups it's actually a 1,200 square foot greenhouse. It's very sophisticated light deprivation, light augmentation, automated greenhouse, very nice systems. And they get to occupy that greenhouse for 3 years rent free. Now that in alone, right there, that meets the letter and the letter of the law, the ordinance for the social justice program, and that allows them to operate, and that allows us to operate in the city of Oakland. We've then taken it further, and what we're trying to meet is actually the spirit and the intent of the ordinance. And so instead of just saying, here's your space, good luck, see you in 3 years, we are working daily with our social equity partners. We train them on the job. They've been interning with us while their greenhouses are being constructed. They're learning the ins and outs of the business. They're learning branding. They're learning the economics around sales and accounts receivable. You name it. We are open. If one of the applicants says, "Great, I've been doing cloning for the last 3 months. I'd like to work on something else," we give them that opportunity and we train them up so that when they do actually start running their own business, which is we're gonna have a ribbon cutting here, I'd say within the next month. When they start running their own businesses, they're gonna know how to do that.
Can you talk about failure, what it's meant to you in your career, and how it's informed you as a successful entrepreneur now?
Sure. Any entrepreneur is going to tell you you're going to fail, and you're going to fail a lot, and then you're going to finally, you're just looking for that one success. And I would say I personally have been fortunate. I haven't had large failures, nothing catastrophic, but I fail every day. I fail every day. My team fails every day, and we just learn. We learn from that. we had some issues around our sales team about a year and a half ago. Our sales team was getting lackadaisical. They weren't representing the brand outward. They weren't very well. They weren't managing accounts very well. Our AR was going through the roof. That was huge. That could have become catastrophic to us. It could have degraded the brand, and it could have hurt our finances just significantly. So that was a minor failures that just kept adding up, and we wanted to avoid this catastrophe. And so we just pivot. We fire people when we need to. We hire talent when we need to. And in that case, we hired a new VP of sales comes from craft beer, and he spent the last year rebuilding our sales team and rebuilding our presence in the marketplace. So, to your question about failure, it's just you have to fail. You have to fail, but you need to be quick in getting yourself up and finding a solution. And to me, that's the true path to success for any entrepreneur, is to allow yourself to iterate and to fail and just pick yourself up and move forward quickly.
You guys, like we talked about, are operating in the state of California, which is a pretty saturated marketplace. Do you think that there is still room for new market entrants?
Absolutely. I truly, absolutely believe that. And you used the word saturated marketplace. There's some truth in that, but I'd say the saturation is because of market constriction. 2 years ago in California, there was over 3,000 dispensaries in the state. Right now, it was worse. We had about 250 in around January of 2018, and it's grown now. There's about 700 dispensaries in the state, but that's still considerably less than the 3,000 that there were a couple of years ago. So that market constriction has created or exacerbated the saturation of the marketplace, and that's just been extremely problematic for the industry in general. It's made it challenging to innovate and get new products on the market, because the shelves are constricted by just the more day-to-day products like flowers and pre-rolls and vapes. And what else the constriction of the marketplace has done is it's made for a thriving illicit market. It's estimated today in California that for every dollar spent in the regulated market, $2 to $3 are spent in the illicit market. So that's extremely problematic when your illicit market is twice as big as your regulated market. And that's really been a problem for innovation and new brands and new companies and new products coming to market. But to answer your question directly, I do believe that there is room in this space, and I believe now the room in the industry is for very laser-focused companies to come in and produce one very good product or one very good service and focus on that, and not worry about all of the other elements around that. So, for example, yes, I'm a vertically integrated business. I've been doing this for 10 years. I had to build my vertical, and we're going to maintain our vertical integration. But if I were to enter the market today, I would not do that. And so I advise people when they ask me, how do I come into the marketplace? How do I come into the cannabis marketplace? I advise them to look at the landscape, find out what you're most interested in and what you're best at, and focus right there and build a very strong product or a very strong service. And there is a lot of room in the market for that today.
Well said. Thank you. Last question. The media has shifted the way it covers the industry from, kind of like laughing at it from behind, its fingers to looking at it with awe as it has grown. And now they're taking a harder look at it. If you were able to get, the San Francisco Chronicle or the Wall Street Journal to write one story, and not about you, but just what is the most underreported story in the media? What is everybody missing?
Well, I'm going to give you a teaser for the op-ed that I am preparing. How's that? I want to write this op-ed.
Tease away.
And this is not focused on me. This is not focused on NUG. This is focused on the industry, the state of things. And the story that's not being told right now is, in fact, the state of things. And what I mean by that is nobody's telling the overarching story of what is going well and more importantly, what's going wrong in California. And people are focusing on small things. People are focusing on banking. People are focusing on the illicit market. Right now, a lot of people are focusing on vapes, on vaporizing, and the health and public health around vaporizing. But nobody's tying all of those and others together in an overarching story that says, look, here's what's happening in California. We have a market that was, hundreds of millions of dollars in size before it even became regulated. The regulations set up a two-tiered structure where there's local control and state control, and the right hand is not talking to the left. We have far fewer dispensaries now than we did a couple years ago, and they're not opening at a fast enough pace. We have illicit market that is thriving. It's growing and it is thriving to the point where brands are spinning out of the illicit market right now. You should see the sophistication of the packaging in the illicit market. It'll blow your mind. And then that's leading to things such as directly that the counterfeit products and the packaging in the illicit market is leading directly to this vape crisis that we have right now, which people are buying what they think are branded vaporizers and tested vaporizers on the illicit market, and they're not. And many of those don't even have real cannabis in them, and that's a public health crisis. So again, I'm still framing this, but there's this overarching picture where regulations and enforcement of the regulations or lack thereof is creating this perfect storm that is now trickling down to a public health issue. And we need to get people to spend their money in regulated stores so that the new stores can open, so that the public health is controlled, and so that the wheels of the industry can start spinning again, and innovation can start picking up again, and we can get to where we all want to be.
Thank you.
Great answer. I'm excited to read this.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that we post if it pops before this show. We'll make sure we post a link in the show notes. If not, we'll be tweeting it out.
Great.
Yep. Can you tell us where we can find you? Social handles,
Sure.
Where do you want us to point people to?
Yeah, sure. So you can find NUG products at almost any. We're in about 60% of the stores in California. So please ask for NUG products by name. Go to your local dispensary and ask for us. We're probably on those shelves. You can also find us at nug.com. And we are pretty prominent on Instagram with the handle @NUG.
Thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Our thanks to John Oram from NUG. Check them out at nug.com and make sure to check out their very excellent blog. And then also on Instagram @NUG. As always, if you want to chat with us, you can find us on Twitter @the_greenrush or on Instagram @greenrush_podcast, or drop us an email at greenrush@kcsa. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcatcher. One take, Shay. One take.
Cannabis! Cannabis!